Hi everybody, it's Charles from Novak Migration. Today a few words about how to get a skills assessment with ACS, Australian Computer Society. Where would you start and how do you know if the ACS, Australian Computer Society, is the relevant skills assessment for your occupation? Probably going to Home Affairs website would be the best place to start. It's not the official. Officially, you would have to go to the legislation, but let's say this one it's current, should be, but might not be. Let's assume it is. Skilled occupation list, they have got all of the occupations which are on relevant lists listed over here. So go ahead. What would be your occupation? Programmer. Search. Analyst programmer. Developer programmer. Program director, not exactly, but that's different one. Software application programmer is not elsewhere classified. So essentially, over here you will also have the information about the types of the visas which you might be eligible for, the assessing authority, which list, and what is the relevant ANSCO code, Australian and New Zealand Standard Classification of Occupations. Whenever you are applying for any visa based on your skills, qualifications, occupation, you need to specify the occupation and relevant ANSCO code. All right. So if you click on this one, let's open a new tab. It will lead you to the Australian Bureau of Statistics website, ANSCO. Okay. Software application programmers, what is the expectation? Skill level 1, bachelor or more. However, at least 5 years relevant work experience may substitute for the formal qualification. And that's what ACS is also taking into consideration in some instances when they are doing the skills assessment. And there are the 5 occupations within the particular group. But I will not be talking about the groups, ANSCO codes, and so on and so on. So let's say your occupation is analyst programmer 261311. You know that the ACS is the relevant skills assessment authority, and then you will have to find out what are the requirements for the successful outcome of the skills assessment, right? So ANSCO code information, this PDF file is available on the ACS website. You may Google it. And analyst programmer, that's their expectation for the occupation. And, essentially, this is taken from the ANSCO website. So if you will have a look on the analyst programmer 261311, 261311 analyst programmer, researching, consulting, analyzing, researching, consulting, analyzing. See, it's generally copy and paste from the ANSCO website. All right, so you found out that analyst programmer is probably the relevant occupation because you have had a look on the description of duties, and it is more or less what you are doing, right? So what sort of the evidence, what sort of the requirements are for the skills assessment? What you really want to do, go to the Google and type ACS Guidelines, and then you will get maybe on the top, maybe somewhere lower. Sometimes you might need to write Australian Computer Society Guidelines because some other stuff will pop up on the top, and then you will get the most recent guidelines. Okay, it's PDF file. All right, download it to your local drive and then open it. Why you want to Google it? Because they are changing the rules from time to time, and you see it's version 7.0 already. And they might change the rules again in the future. I don't know. Probably this video will be forever in the whatever, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. Okay, so honestly, you want to Google it and you want to get the most recent guidelines. So now it's up to version 7.0. Then you open the guidelines, and honestly, the guidelines are really, really good. October 21. This is the most recent. To date, what it is, January 23, all right? And then what you want to establish first of all is the qualifications. Because dependent on the qualifications, there are different pathways. And what they want to see is, remember, ANSCO they are expecting that you would have at least a bachelor degree or higher. So at least bachelor, could be master, could be PhD, or at least 5 years of relevant work experience. But dependent, if you have got the bachelor or not, then there are different requirements for the work experience, and dependent on your bachelor, whether it was ICT major, ICT minor, ICT major related to your occupation, not related to your occupation, or bachelor totally irrelevant to the IT, then there is different requirement for the work experience. All right. But all right, so ICT major, bachelor degree level, standard 3-year bachelor level qualification deems as having a major in complete list. 33% of the qualification is ICT. 33, not much. Qualifications that are longer in duration are assessed to the equivalent of a 3-year IQF level 7, which is bachelor. Level 8, I think it's master. 9, master or postgrad. Graduate certificate, graduate diploma, and then above masters it would be PhDs, but at least bachelor. Diploma, advanced diploma, associate degree, deemed as having major computing at least 50%. Postgraduate qualification, 2 years postgraduate qualification, and so on and so on. So how do they know if your bachelor from overseas is equivalent of the Australian bachelor? There is something called CEP, Country Educational Profile. Australia, the Department of Education has got the website where they have got the information about the different countries, different schooling systems in those countries, and how the qualifications from those countries are comparing to Australian qualifications. And quite often, a bachelor from overseas is being considered as the advanced diploma in Australia. So that's what each and every skills assessment authority essentially is using when they are comparing overseas qualifications to Australian qualifications. It's paid service. We are paying for that. We are having access, and whenever I'm doing the skills assessment, I'm checking the qualifications from overseas for the client. How does it match with the Australian qualifications? Sometimes people are saying, yeah, I got the bachelor, so just 2 years of work experience, happy days. And then I'm going to the website, advanced diploma, you need 4 years, 4 or 6. We get there. So ICT major criteria, then ICT minor criteria, ICT insufficient ICT content, closely related ICT content, and so on and so on. And then dependent on the qualifications, vendor certifications, they don't take into consideration for vendor certifications anymore. Employment references, release payment, there is nice table. Okay, that's the one or not? No. That was the one. Okay, so then dependent on your qualifications, you need the work experience, but post Australia study. All right. There are 4 different pathways for the skills assessment. Temporary graduate is for the people who have finished their bachelor in Australia. But there are 2 different streams for the 485 visa, where you would need the PSA, provisional skills assessment, for 485. If you're applying for 485 after a bachelor, you don't need the skills assessment. You're applying to the post-study stream. If you're applying through the graduate stream, you need the skills assessment. Normally, if you do the bachelor, you don't need the skills assessment. But there are some people who might have finished bachelor in Australia, but if they have had their first student visa in 2011, 12 or something like that, I don't remember the date exactly, they are not eligible for the post-study, and they will have to do through the graduate stream. So they might need to do the provisional skills assessment with for the temporary graduate stream. All right, so this is only for the 485 where somebody is applying for the 485 to the graduate stream. So it's only bachelor is required. Then the proper skills assessment, the proper, which you can use for any skilled visa or the sponsored visa, is post-Australian study. All right, so only applicable for Australian bachelor degree holders or higher. So bachelor or master's or PhD, whichever. Then there is the general skills assessment. So this is for, doesn't matter where did you do your study, if it was in Australia or overseas. You might have studied in Australia, okay, and normally you'd go with the post-Australian study, but nothing stops you from going through the general assessment, general skills assessment. All right, and then there is recognition of prior learning for people who don't have relevant qualifications or the ICT component is insufficient. So pathway 1, which is temporary graduate, essentially you need to provide the evidence that you have studied. Then pathway 2, post-Australian studies. So this is for those who have studied in Australia. So there are two different ways how you can get the skills assessment under the post-Australian study. Either completion of ACS professional year, all right, or 1 year of relevant work experience completed after the completion date of the relevant Australian degree. So 1 year of the work experience after study in Australia or professional year. If you would have worked 1 year, then you have got the relevant work experience, and your skills assessment will be relevant to your work experience. If you will have a professional year, then which occupation is quite broad. You can get a few different skills assessment from a few different occupations. So post-Australian study, it's either professional year or 1 year of relevant work experience. And usually you will get the work experience on 485 visa. Pathway 3, this one is interesting. General skills assessment, right? So then it's about the qualifications. If your qualifications from overseas or Australia, usually overseas, are compared with bachelor degree or higher, so bachelor, masters, whatever, Australian qualification framework, comparable qualification. So first of all, you are checking whether it's comparable with the bachelor degree at all on this website. If it is bachelor, then the question is if it's ICT major or ICT minor. You remember this, 33% or less or more. And then if it is ICT major, and then work experience is closely related to the other way. The ICT major is closely related to your nominated occupation, then you will have to provide evidence of 2 years of the relevant work experience completed within the past 10 years or 4 years completed any time. All right. So 2 years within 10 years. What's interesting, it does not have to be after qualifications. So if you would, if you have worked as the developer programmer before you have completed your bachelor or while you've been studying your bachelor, that work experience could be taken into consideration for your work experience. Okay, so 2 years within 10 years, 4 years anytime. And if ICT content is ACT major, but is not closely related to your nominated occupation, it's 4 years anytime. Not closely related, ACT major, usually it's about the people who have studied the electronics, this kind of stuff, not pure IT. Electronics is usually considered as the ICT major, but if you are working as the developer programmer and so on, it's not closely related to your nominated occupation, and you have to provide 4 years of the evidence of 4 years of the relevant work experience. Then ICT minor, closely related to nominated occupation, you need to provide evidence of 5 years in past 10 years or 6 years anytime. Then ICT minor, not closely related to your nominated occupation, 6 years of relevant work experience completed anytime in your past work history to meet the criteria. And once again, it could be before, during, or after your qualifications. And then diploma, advanced diploma, or associate degree. Remember, I have mentioned that some bachelors from overseas are considered associate degree or diploma or advanced diploma in Australia. So if your overseas bachelor, and usually that's for Brazil and some South American countries, will be considered as the advanced diploma, and it was ICT major, closely related to your occupation, you will require 5 years of the work experience within 10 years, or 6 years anytime. If it's ACT major not closely related, 6 years of relevant work experience. And still, if you have got relevant qualifications, you will have to provide a few years of the work experience related to your occupation. All right. And the thing is that on the skills assessment outcome, they will take away all of these years, as the skilled date will be after all of these years. So the first 5 years, 4 years, 2 years, 6 years, whichever, they will take away, and they will put the skilled date, after 6 years since you have started working in the occupation. Whether you can climb these years of the work experience or not, it's tricky for ACS. If you would have had bachelor degree with ACT major, quite often it's okay to assume that the work experience could be climbed after finishing the bachelor, despite ACS took away a couple of years of work experience, but it's tricky. It's case by case. All right. And then if you don't have diploma, advanced diploma, associate degree, or bachelor degree in ICT, or your bachelor is totally irrelevant with IT, okay? If your qualification assessed, you will go through the RPL. So that's where ACS is using this thing, as at least 5 years of relevant experience may substitute for the formal qualification, and or relevant vendor certification might substitute for the formal qualification. So based on that, ACS is doing the RPL, and their EU qualification diploma or higher with insufficient ICT content, you will require 6 years relevant work experience completed any time in your past history, plus a recognition of the prior learning application. And you do this application the same time when you do the skills assessment. So essentially, you will have to describe how you have used your ICT knowledge during different projects, and you will have to provide some statements, your own description, stuff like that. If you have no recognized tertiary educational qualifications, 8 years, and RPL. So if you don't have any qualifications relevant to IT, you don't have the diploma, for example, you have finished just high school and then you've been working as the IT professional, you will need 8 years of the work experience, and you will have to go through the RPL process. All right. So dependent on your qualifications, first we are looking at your qualifications, then you are looking whether it was major, minor, and if it was closely related or not closely related to your nominated occupation, then you will determine how many years of the work experience will be required to get the positive skills assessment. All right. So, and then dependent if the work experience also, remember, some of that work experience must be after qualifications and some anytime. So also take that into consideration, dependent through which pathway you are going. This one is after the completion, and general, usually it's anytime. But whether it is within 10 years or anytime, 10 years, they are looking at 10 years back from the date when you are lodging the skills assessment. What sort of the evidence needs to be provided? ICT major, so you can read it. I will not be going to the employment reference. What they want to see, the best is the reference letter from the employer. And on the reference letter, what they want to see is start and finish dates of the employment, position title, description of duties performed. This one is very, 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 and once again, very important. Because more or less based on the description of duties, the ACS assessor will make a determination whether you have worked in the particular occupation or not. Quite often people are trying to get their work experience assessed against developer, programmer, or software engineer, because these occupations are on the MLT SSL, and you can apply for the ENS, for example. but then when the assessor is having a look at the description of duties, they are saying, no, you are not the developer programmer, you are, for example, a website developer. And so be very, very careful what your employer will put on the reference letter. So that's ideal. Get the reference data from the employer and make sure that what is on that reference letter, it's relevant to the occupation for which you want to get the skills assessment. Hours worked, whether it was full-time, part-time, and actual hours worked per week. What's interesting for the ACS, 20 hours per week, it's enough for to climb towards the years of the work experience. And for the 189, 190, 491, 20 hours per week is also enough. It's considered full-time. ENS, RSMS, not ENS, RSMS 494, different story. For those, you need 3 years ENS, and 494, for this you need 3 years, but full-time 38 hours, more or less, okay, not 20. So you might get the skills assessment with 4 years, but if you have worked 20 hours per week, it's gonna be 4 years, 20 hours per week, 2 years pro rata, so you're not eligible for the ENS. But different story. So what they want to see on the reference letter: start and finish days of employment, position title, description of duties performed, hours worked, full-time, part-time, whatever, country where employment was undertaken, because as the IT specialist, quite often you are working in one country, your employer is in the other country, you might be working as the freelancer. So that's when you are self-employed, not really employed, different story. But sometimes employers are sending to another country, and it's happening a lot of the time. There are a few big IT companies in India, and they are actually sending people to Australia, for example. So work experience in India, then work experience in Australia, and each and every period of the work experience must be separately described. Contact details of signatories, so first, last name, email, phone number, and give the direct number to the person who signed the thingy, to your manager. Don't give the contact details to the HRs, because they may not have any idea who you are and what you're doing, where are you working. So you don't really want the case officer, assessor calling the generic number, talking to somebody from HR, and they will say, no, nobody like that is, I don't know that person, I don't know if he's working or she's working in our company. Give the contact details to the person who knows you and who actually wrote the statement. All right, so that's what they want to see on the reference letter from the employer. So this one, and that's the ideal. If you're unable to get this one, different story. You might need to get some statutory declaration. You might from the colleague or somebody else from the company. You might need to get your own statutory declaration. You might need to get the work contract, original work contract with the position description. It's becoming a bit difficult, but doable. Signature of the employer. Don't use the electronic signatures, signed by hand and scanned. That's I know that electronic signatures are, in theory, could be used, but if you have got the proper signature, that has got more weight than the electronic signature. All right. Payment evidence. You must provide 2 different types of documentary evidence. The perfect combination is the pay slips and the bank statements. Usually that's the easiest. All right. If you don't have the bank statements, if you don't have the pay slips, tax records, but in Australia, when you are lodging tax, you are lodging tax return to ATO, or your tax agent is doing that on your behalf, then you are getting a notice of assessment from the ATO, and also your employers are sending something called income statement. So ideally, if in Australia, you would provide income statement, because that's from the ATO, from the third party, and there is the name of the employer. On the notice of assessment, there is no name of the employer. But what they want to see is name of the employer. They want to match you with employer on the third party evidence. What is third party? You're the first party, your employer would be the second party, and the third party, it's another institution, either bank, taxation, superannuation, things like that. So pay slips and bank statements are usually the easiest, right, to get. In some countries like Emirates, Qatar, and so on, where people might be paid cash, there is no tax, no bank statements. I feel sorry for those people because you are unable to provide the evidence for getting paid for the job. And the ACS, it's not taking into consideration any statements from employers or whatever. No, it must be documents from those. So if you are unable to provide two different types of evidence, end of story. That work experience will not be considered. And I had one stubborn client which said, yeah, let's provide and we'll see. And yeah, it has not been assessed. That work experience where there were no relevant. There were sort of pay slips, but no bank statement, nothing else. So it wasn't enough for ACS. So we had to wait for another half a year until we got the proper 2 years of the bank statements and everything to get the positive outcome. All right. So 2 out of 4. So that's for the payment evidence. So ideally, the reference letter from the employer, pay slips, bank account statement. All right. So that's for the work experience. Statutory declarations, affidavits. That's the other sort of evidence which might be provided if you don't have the reference letter from your employer. Apart from those, what they need? Identity. 3 forms of identity documents: passport and 2 additional government issued identity documents from the country of birth or country of current residence, with at least one which bears the applicant's photograph. So passport and another 2. So national ID if you have got one, driver's license if you have got one, birth certificate. So probably passport, birth certificate, and national ID, or driver's license. That would be the best combination. But sometimes you don't have the birth certificate. India, school leaving certificate could be taken into consideration. Aadhaar card in India, yeah, that's another national ID, and you have got your photo on it. So then you will need the third one. Resume. They also want to see the resume, so everything will be over there, so they can have a look. Education, degree, diploma, certificate, call it, and then transcript or record of results. So those 2 documents, and employment reference, and evidence of paid employment. Then if you are using migration agent authorization form, for the RPL, you will have to complete and submit all of the form and some additional documents is or as required. And professional year if you are applying to the professional year. So more or less that's it. So what you need to understand is qualifications. Your qualifications is the first thing you need to look at, because that will determine how many years of the work experience you will have to provide, right? So that will be it. Thank you very much for being with you, and speak to you next time.